This is a new voice for a new Scotland.
Hello, and welcome to Ken Bates' Conversations here on Indylive.radio. In the coming weeks, I'll be speaking to indie activists born outside of Scotland who've made this great country their home. In this, the first episode, I chat with Robertson Wellen, who lives in the southwest of Scotland, and I began by asking him about life before he came to live in Scotland.
I worked in professional theater for over 20 years. I toured America, 13 times or something like that, toured Canada. I toured to the UK, to Scotland, to the International Fringe Festival, which of course is the biggest, most wonderful theater thing in the world, in Edinburgh. But I did that for years, and then I retired from the road, which is a really brilliant when you're young, but not so great when you get older. So I retired from the road and I started teaching, and I became a professor. I taught a few different places around America, 3 different universities around America. But I traveled extensively in America. I worked in 48 of the 50 states. And everywhere we went, we'd work with local people who'd come in to help, put the show up, tear the show down, that sort of thing. So I got to meet people from all around America, and really, I think I got a good sense of the people. And I kept ending up in California, which I wasn't raised there. I was raised in cowboy country, but I kept ending up in California from work. And California is sort of well known as the most liberal part of America. And while I was there, I got involved in some politics locally, and America took a big jump to the right with George Bush, and politics changed. They started. You didn't have to be smart to be president anymore. And now, of course, obviously they've taken that to the nth degree now. But with George Bush, they really started to change what the presidency was about and what the country was about and where it was going. And the country really took a step to the right. Racism has always been a problem in America, and it got worse. And now Black Lives Matters now really has turned a light on what's been going on in America for a very long time. It was a huge problem when I was there. And again, I was in California, and there was huge racism problems there. So I felt America was going a bit too much to the right for me to be comfortable. And passing a lot of laws that I didn't like. They were doing breaking the Constitution as far as I was concerned. And I got lucky in that I met a Scottish woman. And she was out there as a nurse, lived out there for many, many years. And we met, and we came to Scotland for holidays. And I had fallen in love with Edinburgh back in the 80s when I toured. But then I came to Dumfries and Galloway. And it's just stunning here. It's a wonderful place here. So I really started liking this as well. So we, at one point in time, when George Bush got in the second time, we just kind of said, we don't have to live here. We have a choice, which a lot of people don't in this world. We have a choice. We could move to Scotland. So we started looking at that. And it took us about 5 years to do the whole process, but we did it. We sold everything. We quit our jobs, moved here, bought a house here, started a business here, and big change of life. Los Angeles to Dumfries is a big change of life.
Yeah, I bet. What were your first impressions of Scotland? I know that you'd visited on a number of occasions, and you've been to Edinburgh and the Fringe Festival, but obviously living somewhere is completely different from just visiting. So what were your first impressions of actually living here? How did you find it?
Well, it's a couple of things became very clear. One, things move a lot slower here. I was used to a very fast-paced life, not just in Los Angeles, but just in general, working in professional theater. Everything's so fast, and everybody's so wound up, so tight. And people here, life moves slower. People are less freaked out about stuff. And one of the things I noticed early on is that people here, I think there's even a phrase about you'd cross the street to help someone or something. You would cross the road to help someone. There's a saying, and I found that here. If somebody fell down drunk up the high street, 3 or 4 people would come to them and say, "Oh, you all right, pal? Oh, I think you had too much," and they'd help the guy instead of just filming with your phone and put it on the internet to laugh at the guy, which also happens. But I think people here care a little more about their brother and sister. That's the feeling I get.
Mm.
There's a lot more social sort of safety nets. America isn't a big fan of safety nets. We are raised to believe that if something goes wrong in your life, you lose your job, things go terrible for you, you probably deserve it. And I don't see that here as much. There's a little, but I don't see that as much here. Most people here tend to say, God, can I help you, pal? What can I do for you? And I noticed that early on, and I liked that, and I still like that. I think it's still here. There's that quality. And the other thing I noticed, which is probably more of a negative quality, is that folks here, especially in Scotland, I'm not sure it's so true in England, but folks in Scotland don't seem to know about their own country and about their own history and about, well, a good example is how much money Scotland makes. As an outsider coming here and opening a business and seeing, what's going on, this is such a rich country. And also I have family connections to Norway, so I've been to Norway a lot. And the parallels are huge. You go to Norway and you're like, wow, this is what Scotland should be. But you look at, and not just oil. I mean, I know everybody jumps on oil, but not just oil. But Scotland has so many huge things. I'm a Scotch whiskey drinker. The Scotch whiskey industry, when you leave Scotland and be anywhere in the world, Scotch whiskey it's huge. It's worth so much money, and it's so well respected. It's probably the most well respected food and drink item in the world, I would think. The quality is so important, and the tradition and all of that, all that stuff that goes with Scotch whiskey. And people here don't drink it, don't know anything about, not. And I know I'm generalizing, I realize that, but a lot of folks, they don't even know about Scotland. They don't know about their own history. Robert the Bruce killed John the Red Comyn here in Dumfries. You'd be surprised how many people here don't know that. That was Dumfries. He's king of Annandale. He came from this area. We've got huge Robert the Bruce history here. A lot of its battles. My wife and I, in the first 5 years or so we moved here, we visited a lot of the battle sites in Galloway, and the Bruce's Stone, and one of the caves. They think, well, maybe he hid in this cave.
Is that the one on Arran? Is that the one on Arran by any way chance? That particular cave?
No, there's a local one.
Oh, right.
There's a few. Yeah. There's a few around. It's kind of. I'd like to visit them all. And I think even Ireland. People have said he went to Ireland. But there's a lot of that Bruce stuff around. So we traveled to a lot of that and saw that, and of course in Dumfries you've got Robert Burns. I've studied a lot about Burns. My wife is huge into Burns. And there's great connections here in Dumfries. Obviously, he's buried here, and there's a lot of things here. And so you start reading about that, and it's amazing. I was a big Shakespeare guy when I was in theater. I studied a lot about Shakespeare and knew him inside and out. So when I went to Stratford for the first time, that was big for me, because I had real respect for Shakespeare. And so Burns was sort of new to me, and I've really enjoyed in the last 10, 15 years learning about Burns. And some people with the crazy notion that he was a unionist, which is, you clearly don't know anything about Burns if you think you've never read what, he wrote a few things that supported the Union once they threatened to kick him out of the country. But, come on, we'd all do that, wouldn't we? So I don't know. I've learned a lot about Burns and Bruce and the Scottish history and the Scottish people, and I'm amazed at. Well, the Scots language is another good example. I'm a big fan of the Scots language. I learned a lot about it, and I've learned a lot of words, and try to really get into it. And my wife was told as a child she spoke that way at home, but she couldn't speak that way at school, and she couldn't speak that way when she went to visit her aunties, because her aunties were teachers. You had to speak proper. And that, again, coming from America, where we just changed English to meet our own needs. We respelled things. We changed everything. Yeah. It's kind of weird now to come here, and then Scots have their own language, and they're told, oh, no, it's not a real language. Oh, no, it's not, you shouldn't be. There's a weird downgrading of people here. And I think it's probably hundreds of years. And the parallel that I see, because of where I grew up, which was Lakota country. It was in the cowboy country, the Native American country. The parallels I see with Native Americans and with Scots is very, very distinct to me. And I don't know that too many people here think that, and I wouldn't want to offend anyone by saying that, but I see parallels because the Scottish people kicked off their land and replaced with sheep. Not that far from the Native Americans being kicked off their land and having their land stolen and then stuck in reservations. Now, they didn't stick Scots in reservations, but they did stick them on a boat. And so I see parallels of that sort of thing because they attacked Native American culture, they attacked Native American languages, all that, their religion, well, we're going to Christianize you, all the sort of stuff they did to Native Americans. I do see parallels here. And I would hope that, I've seen Scottish people learning about their own country and their own history and their own language and all of that in the 15 years I've been here. It's really grown, it's really changed. And I think the Yes Movement's responsible for a lot of that. My guess.
Yeah. What about the food? Did you, I mean, the foods, there's some wonderful foods here in Scotland. I mean, because I'm from England originally, and, I was married, well, I wasn't married. The partner, mother of my eldest child. So I was introduced to lawn sausages or square sausage, and some of the subtleties, some of the subtle differences in the food here. And of course, unfortunately, being from England, there's always the stereotype of the deep fried Mars bar. I've never had one, to be honest with you. I've never seen one. I'm sure they probably exist, but the food's obviously very different from America, I should imagine.
Well, it's funny. There's an interesting snobbery that people from here do against Americans, and Americans do it right back. And food is one of those things, because Americans look at food from England, food from Scotland, and think, "Oh God, it's so awful. Oh, you eat black pudding. Oh my God, how can you eat it? You eat haggis, the worst thing. Oh, that sort of stuff." But yet people here do the same thing to America about hot dogs and McDonald's and, all that sort of stuff. Because Americans eat a lot of crap food. That's why Americans are also overweight. I'm one. I'm huge. Americans are overweight because we eat crap food. And I mostly ate good food. I stopped eating fast food. God, 81. I haven't had fast food since 81. So it is what you eat. But the food thing is funny because I've never had a Mars bar here. I am amazed that people here don't eat fish, unless it's been battered and fried. And it's ridiculous. There's fantastic fish all the way around, and shellfish, langoustines, lobster, oysters. There's so much fantastic food around the UK, and especially in Scotland. The food, Dumfries and Galloway's food is the best. And I really wish there'd be more to promote it, because the Oyster Festival in Stranraer, put a shout out for that. Anyone who's into really good festivals, the Oyster Festival, they bring in professional chefs and it's a it's a big party sort of thing with music and stuff. But the food here is fantastic. And we need to get away from the nonsense like deep fried Mars bars and into the real food, the oysters, the langoustines, the lobster, the beef in America, Black Angus, which most people don't even know Angus. Is that Scotland? They don't even know that. But Black Angus is the most respected beef in America. The beef from here is terrific. The Galloway breed, both the Belty and the Black Galloway, great beef, absolutely amazing. But I don't think people here know that, and that's kind of funny. But the food's an interesting thing, because I'm into my food. I like my food just like I like my whiskey. And Dumfries and Galloway could easily have like touring around eating good food tours, like you would do in France or something, because the food here is absolutely outstanding, and there's great chefs here too. And I don't know why people don't know that. Everyone thinks it's deep fried haggis or something, but there is really great food here.
Mm-hmm. So when you first came to Scotland, what did you know about Scottish independence and the independence cause, and the growing support for what's now called Indylive 2, of course, because the first independence referendum, as we both know, was unsuccessful. Were you an independence supporter when you first came to Scotland? Did it sort of something that you sort of learnt about over a period of time?
Well, I don't really have a story on, a journey or some big thing happened and I went, oh my God, now suddenly I support yes. Coming where I grew up, and not just in America, but in sort of, a small town and that sort of thing, we were raised quite patriotic and quite independent. And I was having memories this morning before this about independence. And I remember 1976 as a small boy, that was the 200-year anniversary of America's independence. And it was a glorious summer, big, great summer. And I was just a wee lad. And it was a fantastic summer. And that's when I really started learning about independence and what it meant for a country and all of that. And I was sold. Even as a little boy, I was sold. So when I came here, it wasn't really an issue for me. To me, independence is normal. You go to Norway, same thing. You go to Norway, you talk to people in Norway. It's like, well, yeah, of course, independence is normal. They got their independence from Sweden. It's perfectly normal to them. They were broke, by the way, when they got their independence. America wasn't broke, but it wasn't doing great. You know, it was all taxation issues and all of that. I also had a memory this morning that first time I was in London on one of the tubes, an English person wanting to offend me called me, oh, you're from the colonies. And I, you know, to an American, that doesn't even make any sense. We don't think of ourselves that way. We don't, you know, it doesn't make any sense to us. And I just went, what do you mean? Oh, you're a colonial, you're from the colonies. And I said, no, we're an independent country now. You remember, we kicked your ass and we got our independence. And it, you know, that kind of stuff, it washes over you. You don't think about it. But I was thinking this morning about it, thinking, oh, isn't that funny? That way back then, you know, the attitude is sort of, well, of course I'm independent. Of course I'm from an independent. Of course that's what people do. That's what countries do. Of course we're, you know. So when it came about in Scotland, I sort of got politically active, I suppose, here 2008, 2009. When we were visiting the Bruce sites and the Bruce battle sites, and we were reading about independence, because I didn't know much about it. We don't really learn about it in the States. So reading about what's happened here and the history and the people, and I started looking at the finances. I run a small business now, and I started looking at the finances of the country and saying, well, this doesn't make sense. You know, would Norway send all of its money to Sweden and have some sent back? I don't think so. Would America send all its money to Canada and have some sent? I don't think so. So it seemed weird to me that Scotland was in this relationship that didn't seem to serve Scotland, in my opinion. It didn't seem to serve Scotland, still doesn't. And so it was sort of just natural for me to support independence, even though I suppose there was a movement, but I didn't know there was one until probably, I don't know, 2012, 2013, I started to hear about a movement. And 2014, I was very active. I was out all the time. We leafleted, we did hustings, we did all sorts of stuff. I helped as much as I possibly could. We were all over the place, got a lot of great pictures. And that was a nice summer, as I remember. We got some great photos, and we really started getting active about it. And I had a circle of friends at that particular time that all but one supported. Two English guys and a Scottish guy. We were all pals. We're all hanging out together and drinking whiskey together and stuff. And one was very much against independence, real true. He's a real England guy. And the other two were full support. The other English guy and the Scottish guy, full support of independence. So we'd have these discussions, you know. But even the guy who was against independence, he totally supported our opinion. He said, hey, if the Scottish people vote that way, they vote that way. You know, he wasn't going to fight against it. He just, you know, he just would hate to see it happen, was basically what he said. You know, but my whole circle of friends, we were kind of in agreement anyway. But we were quite active. We did a lot of stuff around here in Dumfries. Not really known as a yes center. You know, there's not many of us. But it's growing. And I've seen, certainly in since 2014, it's really grown here. A lot of people, and a lot of them are conservatives, who now support independence. And if I can get a message out there to folks, is we need to start giving Tories permission to support independence. Yeah. We need to say, look, you know, when we become independent, it's not like the Conservative Party is going to disappear. They're still going to be here. They're still going to be voting Conservative. They won't be able to use the word unionist anymore, but they're still going to be here. And they're still going to want to protect business, and they're still going to want to do the things they want to do. So I think as a movement, the Yes campaign really needs to start saying, you know, we need to give Labour permission to be Labour and Tory permission to be Tory, because independence is coming. It's going to happen. It's normal. It's going to happen. And we should all get together, work together, you know.
Yeah, I
My
saw.
2 cents.
Yeah, no. I saw somewhere yesterday, and I can't remember where I read it on a. I think it was a reliable news website. I tend to try and use reliable sources. That there are members of even of the Labour Party in Scotland that are actually leaving the party because of the stance that they're taking, being
Yes.
pro-union, and of course,
Yes.
especially with Jackson Carlaw and the Conservatives, the Scottish Conservatives, they're very pro-union as well. So it must be quite difficult, I think, for some Conservatives, considering what their leadership is saying, for them to still remain conservative and to take a pro-independence viewpoint, and might be a bit of a quandary for some, possibly.
Yeah. Well, and the best thing for the Conservative Party in Scotland will be independence. That's the best thing, because you look at the fights between Ruth Davidson and Carla and even some of the others with Westminster. They're always fighting with their Westminster leadership. You see it all the time. They were so anti-Boris. They led, I forget what it was called, Project Arse or something. They had this whole movement against Boris, and now they all have to support him. It would be the best thing for the Conservatives, and I wish they'd see that, because most of the Conservatives I talk to don't. But we're surrounded by Conservatives here. There's loads of them in the council and stuff. What people don't know is our council here in Dumfries is actually a Labour SNP coalition. So even though we've got Tory MSPs and Tory MPs and stuff, there's still a lot of movement for the other parties. But I do wish that the Conservative Party would see they'd actually probably grow and get more votes and do better if they broke free and became an independent party. Just like the country needs to be independent, the party needs to be independent. And I don't know if I can even talk about Labour, because I don't know what Labour's killed themselves. The Tories are the only party really left. Well, no, the Greens, I guess, but Lib Dems, certainly down here, the Lib Dems have pretty much killed themselves. Labour's pretty much killed itself. It's interesting. People think we're like Dumfries and Galloway always votes Tory, but in the last 3 elections, we've had a Conservative MP, we've had an SNP MP, and we've had a Labour MP in only 8 years or something. So the voters here don't just vote one way. They change down here, depending on who the person is, personality, what's going on nationally. It's not a wash here, and that's what I guess that gives me hope, because I keep campaigning and I keep working and I keep encouraging others. We shouldn't give up and just say, oh well, everybody's going to vote for the Conservatives, because it's just not true.
Would you say that? And also, one thing I noticed when I first moved here is the actual difference. I mean, you look at Westminster in action and the MPs in action at Westminster, and then you compare that to MSPs and how things are done at Holyrood. There's definitely two very different ways of running the countries there, isn't there? The UK government and all the noise they make, whereas here in Scotland things seem to be very different at Holyrood. What are your thoughts about that?
Oh, yeah, I absolutely agree with you there. It's an interesting thing. I spent a lot of time on the internet, on Twitter and stuff. And it's interesting how a lot of the folks in the Yes movement have, they keep screaming about Holyrood and the SNP and the First Minister doesn't support independence anymore and all this sort of stuff, which I have very little patience for. What I see is that Holyrood is running a country, and I think they're doing a good job. I've been here 15 years. I think Holyrood is really, really doing the best they can do with, 1.5 hands tied behind their back. I think they're doing really well. You look at some of the advances they've made for the people, and for business. I own a small business. They do a lot for me. They do a lot more than England would do for me if I had a business down in England. And I think that we need to remember that in addition to all the other things that Holyrood's doing, it's running a country, and it's running a country where you have a media attacking you daily, very often with just outright lies, and it's relentless. The media here, I thought media was bad in America. Oh my God, the media here is, and it seems so biased, especially in Scotland. It's so biased. I haven't looked too much at what the media did when Labour was in charge at Holyrood, but I'd find it hard to believe they were doing what they do every day now. It's quite relentless here. And it's just turned me off to pretty much all the media here. There's very little media that I will do. I'll do my own research on the internet before I'll trust anything from the bulk of the media. you know. But I think we need to remember that Hollywood's also running a country and they're trying to take care of people and they don't want to leave people out to dry. I mean, I remember proposing when the conservatives were talking about let's get rid of tuition and let's get rid of the free prescriptions and let's get rid of all these sort of things. I remember saying to a yes group at a meeting that I think Scotland should have 1 month out of every 12 months, 1 month where Holyrood lets everyone live under Westminster rule. So there are no free prescriptions. There is no free tuition. There are all the things Holyrood's done. Let's just get rid of that for 1 month. There's no bedroom tax, all this sort of stuff. Let's just live under Westminster 1 month out of the year. I think we'd get independence in no time, because I don't think people realize how much Holyrood does to protect us from these the crazy things like rape clauses and all this nonsense that Westminster throws at us. I don't think people here, we're a bit too comfortable. I don't think we realize that we're being protected. And of course, everyone at the meeting said I was crazy and no, shut up. What are you talking about? Nobody liked my idea at all. Just like I've also suggested Scotland should just give the oil to England. Just give it to them. Because they keep saying you can't live without it. I know for a fact, you look at the figures, we can live without it. We don't need it. So I'd just give it to them personally. But I know that's a very unpopular thing. You probably shouldn't even include that because you'll get attacked.
I know. I have heard other people I know say just give Westminster the oil. We don't need it.
To me, it's all they care about. They don't care about the people of Scotland. They don't care about taking. That there's that great phrase out there. They won't even fund a spare bedroom. So why would they fund a country? I think that's absolutely true. I think all they care about is the money that comes from Scotland. And it's a lot. It's a lot more than anyone ever tells us. They give these fake figures to try to hide how much money Scotland makes. But Scotland, near as I could tell, Scotland makes a lot of money. So I'd love to see the real figures someday. But we won't until we get fiscal autonomy. We'll never see the real figures.
And being from England, and I remember I was saying to an interview I did yesterday that there's in England especially, there's a lot of talk and people seem to make the assumption that somehow, and people believe it, that Scotland is somehow subsidised by the UK government constantly, and this Barnett formula, as they call it, and people think it's just a grant that the UK government give to Scotland, somehow seemingly forget that people in Scotland pay taxes, and the revenue from the oil and the gas, the revenue from which basically saved the United Kingdom in the 70s, which was on the brink of bankruptcy, and then the oil and the gas was discovered, and then suddenly, saved. And it is weird that, I mean, admittedly, I used to believe that Scotland was subsidised by the United Kingdom because the propaganda was so powerful down there and continues to be like that. And it is really surprising. And I think, obviously it's not just the oil. We are a resource-rich country here in Scotland. It's the water, especially. I mean, we're pumping water down to England. We've got more water in one lock than they've got in the entire country down south. And of course, the renewable energy, the wind farms that are coming up, the capturing energy from the waves. It's kind of surprising, really. Yet people are going on about us being subsidised. Yet when it comes to asking us for a Section 30 order so that we can have another independence referendum, they say no. I mean, what are your thoughts about this and why the UK government keeps saying no?
I think it's money. I agree with you that the myth about Scotland being subsidized is huge. I've lived here 15 years. I've heard it every week since I've lived here. You meet somebody in the pub, they will immediately, if you get on the subject of politics or Scotland or whatever, they'll immediately say that. At least once a week, I have somebody who says, "Oh, you're from America. Why would you move to Scotland? Like, it's the worst place." And, "Oh, America's so great. There's no poverty there." It's everybody needs to go and visit America and not just Disney worlds. America has huge poverty. And I've argued with people for years about the racism in America, and that's another one where there can't be a racist problem in America because you look at the television and there's no racism. And I kept telling people, you need to visit. You go to Georgia. See, that's why I went to grad school. Go to Georgia. You want to see some racism? just visit America, you know. It's quite an amazing thing how people learn things. And I think everybody here has learned in Scotland, and probably England, Wales as well, that Scotland's subsidized. And it's just not true. It's just such a ridiculous thing. When you look at the Scotch whisky industry, when you look at the salmon industry, which I know there's other problems with that, but the money that's involved is a huge amount of money. The food and drink that comes out of Scotland, we send all these great lobsters and all this stuff down to France and other places. There's so much here. There's a space industry. I remember when that hit the newspapers and all the conservatives were laughing, saying, oh, wow, sure, it's Scotland. Oh, what do they have to do with space? You know, no, we do have a space program. We do make satellites. We are involved in, you know, high-tech games. Every time I tell someone to look at Grand Theft Auto, the guys who made that, you know, everyone thinks they're American. They're not. They're Scottish. So it's this ongoing thing of this sort of brainwashing that people here don't realize what Scotland has and how much it's worth. And I find it sad, but the hopeful side is I think it's been getting better. More people are learning. People like yourself, here's two people who weren't born in Scotland here talking about this. I think more people are learning, you know, that this just isn't true. And I think Westminster hangs on because they know Scotland has money. You know, I remember back 2014 when all the Labour MPs came up to Glasgow. Remember, and the guy with the Empire Strikes, the Empire theme and all that stuff, a great video. But I remember that happening and thinking, oh my God, these guys are terrified. Why would they do, if we were subsidized, we're a bunch of junkies, oh, none of us pay our taxes, they would not have sent them all up here to, you know, show big power and commit, oh, you have to stay with us, oh, we love you, stay with us. They were terrified, and I've only seen that get worse.
That was a lie as well. All of these things that were promised. Yeah. Oh, you know, increased powers and all that. And do you think if we do get another referendum, which we will get another referendum, I'm confident that will happen. It's inevitable. Do you think we're going to see the same tactics again, and will they work?
I do think we'll see the same, and I think they'll probably even get more outrageous. I mean, I've collected some of the outrageous ones from the last one. We were going to get attacked from space. Oh, who's that? Was that? I forget who that was. One of the guys down south said one of the politicians said we were going to get attacked from space. I remember the forces of darkness. That was Lord Robertson said, you know, the forces of darkness are behind this. I've collected those. Those were gems. You know, the absolute ridiculous arguments that were made. And we'll see more of that. I'm convinced of that. We'll see more. There was one recently that really struck my eye. I think it was at the end of 2019 that someone has done some research and they discovered Kurt Cobain killed himself because he had Scottish ancestors. And if you're Scottish, you might as well just kill yourself, basically was the message. A real article. I'll when this is over, I'll find the article. I'll send it to you. Please do. Yeah, I'd like to see it. Shocking that someone would say, oh, well, yeah, it wasn't all the problems in his life and the drugs and the whatever going on. It's because he had a great-great-grandfather who was Scottish who killed himself. So therefore, the Scottish genes made him kill himself. You know, it's one of the most ridiculous anti-Scottish things I've ever seen in my life.
One thing that stands out in my mind, and one of the most powerful, probably one of the most influential accusations that were made, was that pensioners would lose their pensions. That really did make a difference. Would you agree?
I think it did, and I'd love to see either the Yes movement or the SNP take a stance guaranteeing that pensions will double as soon as we're independent and we get control of them. I'd love to see that because I think that's a vote winner. And I know for a fact that the Labour Party was doing it. I know Labour councillors here in Dumfries that were going to doors and telling pensioners that lie, because I hit a door immediately after Labour was there. We were out doing leaflets. We saw a pack of councillors, and they had specific doors. They weren't doing all the doors. They had a list, and they would go to this door, and then they'd move down and they'd go to that door over there. And so we thought, well, let's just, instead of just leafleting, let's knock. Let's see what they were saying. And we knocked on a door, And the person who opened it, we actually got two doors. We got a Polish person too. They were also lying to the Poles. Um, we got a retired person who said, yeah, that was the Labour Party. Do you mind if we asking what they're telling you? And they said not to vote for you guys because you guys are going to take away my pension. And so I'm done. I don't even want to talk to you. And it was that powerful. They wouldn't even talk to us. They wouldn't take a leaflet. They wouldn't nothing. We were taking their pension away from them. That's the end of the argument. And it was amazing how powerful that lie was. And they also told immigrants they were going to be kicked out.
If we look at the statistics in respect of support in different age groups, it's still in the older age groups, the support for independence is higher for no than it is for yes. Do you think that might have had that influence, or do you think that older people are, because, what do you think older people, especially, there are yes supporters, obviously, in the older community, but why there's still majority no? Yeah. Do you think it's to do with that?
I've got friends in their 60s and 70s who are huge supporters of independence down here, in Dumfries and Galloway. So it's definitely not a blanket thing. But certainly statistically, you're absolutely right. You look at the age groups, and there are certain age groups, and it's people just basically my age and older, people from mid-50s and up, who definitely are more on the no side. There's also an interesting group of women in the sort of 30 to 50 range that also are quite no. And they've got to be targeted with information and education and whatever it takes. But I think part of what's behind a lot of the no people who are in the older age brackets is, as we get old, I feel that myself, I do this. As I've gotten older, you do kind of get a little more conservative and a little more afraid of change. I remember as a young person, older people saying, "Oh, kids today, they don't have any rules." And now as I'm getting older, I'm saying this, "Oh, kids today, I'm doing the same thing." I do think there's a bit of that's natural, that as we get older, we tend to don't understand the youth and don't understand their music. Oh, I couldn't listen to that music. And that, I think we get that way. As we get older and you're afraid of change. I noticed my wife's parents are both in their 70s, top mark of 70, getting into 80. And they don't want change. They don't want people to rock the boat. They just don't, everything's fine. They're living on a really tiny pension and they're just getting by, but they don't want to hear about independence. And and I've said to them, well, what if you get a guarantee you'll get more pension? Oh, well, I don't know. It's a fear of change, and I think it's normal. I think it's natural, and it's going to be hard to combat that. One of the things on our side is time, because obviously as time goes on, I know I have nephews and stuff that couldn't vote. Now they can. As time goes on, we'll get more young people moving up who can vote, and I think that's going to make a difference. I think that's going to help us. But we also need to keep education going, because combating the status quo and the lies and the nonsense, we've really got to keep it going. We've got so much work to do. We're nowhere near done. I'm surprised people are saying, well, let's have a referendum tomorrow. I don't know if we'd win it if we had it tomorrow. I would hope so, but we need a campaign. That campaign in 2013, 2014 changed a lot of minds. And we need to do it again. I don't want to win with 51%, or 52-48, the famous Brexit thing. I don't want to win 52-48. I want like 70%. I want us to really win. Like when all the Westminster seats get swept, or when the Hollywood seats get swept by the SNP. I would like to see that big of a win, because we need people on side. We don't want the Brexit nonsense where it's 52-48 and nobody's going to agree, and we did, yeah. That's part of why I think Brexit has failed so miserably. I was against it anyway, but I think it's failed so miserably because it was such a close vote, and then they just plowed ahead like they had a majority. And I find that's a lot of the problem. Scotland didn't vote for it, Northern Ireland didn't vote for it, and oh well, tough. You have to take it because some people voted for it. I don't want that with independence. We need to win. We need to really win. At flip side, I know if we get 50% plus one vote, I know we win, and I'll take it. but I'd rather we won by 70% or something. It would be really good for the country if we clearly won, for reasons we've already discussed about, that Scotland actually has a lot of money and has a lot going for it, and is a lot more self-sustaining. I think the COVID has really started to show what's self-sustaining and what's not. And I think COVID's also done us a great favor for independence, because it showed how competent Nicola Sturgeon and her advisors and Jean Freeman, although again, the press, oh, she's the worst woman in the world, this Jean Freeman woman. She's so good and she's so competent. And we're really lucky in Scotland to have these really powerful, smart, wonderful women leading us. I'd love to make more of that, I'm a big fan of women taking charge. Old white guys like me, our days are done. Let's get some women in here. And I know not all women, there's Margaret Thatcher, and I know that, but I'd still rather shake it up a bit. More people with brown skin, more women, more, I'd much rather just shake it up a bit. As an old white guy, I think I've had my day, and guys like me have had our day.
Okay, let's say, right, we get the referendum, we're granted the referendum, Scotland gets its independence, and on day one of independence, Scotland as a nation in its own right, do you think Scotland would struggle on its own?
I honestly don't. There's a lot of countries that have a lot less than Scotland. I've visited some. There's a lot of countries that struggle. And I can, again, relate back to the United States. Now, the United States as a unit of 50 states is really powerful and really, really wealthy. But those 50 states are not all equal. A lot of those states struggle, and the poverty is huge. And a lot of folks, especially in California, where I'm from, it's the folks that are Mexican or either directly from Mexico, or they're Californians, but their family's Mexican, that kind of thing. And then certainly the African Americans, when you get down into Georgia and Florida and these sorts of places, Tennessee, there's a huge difference in life, and there's a lot of poverty and there's a lot of struggle, and people get by with a lot less than what Scotland has. We are so much more comfortable than I think people think. I mean, a lot of us. I mean, I know, now I'm going to be attacked because I'm a rich white guy. I'm not a rich white guy, but I'm comfortable. And I know not everyone is. I know there's a lot of poverty. And when you look at some of these neighborhoods, and you look at some, certainly immigrants coming in, which I am one, sometimes people are really poor and really broke and really struggle. And I'm really glad that the Scottish government tries to help these people, because in America, they tend to not help people. And that leads to other problems. Then you get more drug, you get more drink, you get more crime. I know there's a lot of drug use and alcoholism in Scotland, and I like that the Scottish government's trying to help with that. The minimum unit pricing, I think, is a good idea. As a whiskey drinker, I think the minimum unit pricing is a good idea. And I also support, they want to do drug rooms, which are successful in other countries. If the country has a problem with drug use, and I think it does, then let's do something to help. Throwing people in prison doesn't help them. Treating them like telling them they're bad people isn't going to help them. Let's get them help. I think the attitude here is what's going to get Scotland through, because this country tends to take care of people and help people. And not everybody has money, and not everybody's comfortable. So let's help each other out, even in little ways. We've got this, do another wee tangent here. We've got this great food bank here in Dumfries. The guy's Mark Franklin, this guy runs it, English fella. Mark Franklin runs it. He's so much more than a food bank. He gets counseling for folks. He works a lot with vets. He works a lot with people who've given up on life. And it's not just poverty and hunger. It's just, they're done. They're done. And he does so much to help these people and get these people on their feet. He's worked with Syrian refugees. He's worked with vets. He's worked with all these people. He really inspires me. And he's a huge Yes supporter, by the way. Huge independence supporter. He got slagged off by the newspapers and by David Mundell because he's a Yes supporter. But he does so much work to help people. And that's the thing that I see when I look around. And I think, will Scotland struggle? Well, maybe we will. But I don't think we will, because everyone here seems to have the right attitude, and let's help each other out. And there's a lot of folks in Scotland that do have money. I'm not a real rich person. I'm comfortable. I get by. But I know people who have a lot of money, they tend to want to help. They're not these cold, hard-hearted, oh, let's starve the poor people. They're not. They're actual good, genuine people who do also have a lot of money. And the attitude is what I think is different here, certainly from America, where in America thinking that, well, if you're poor, you're broke, you got sick, you got cancer, you lost your job, maybe you just deserve it. Maybe God's against you. I don't see that here. What I see here is people helping. So I think when we get independence, if there's a bit of a struggle, if something happens, if something comes along, I think we'll deal with it. I think we'll pull together. I suppose we can make a parallel with the pandemic, with the COVID pandemic. Look how Scotland's pulled together. Lots of people, granted, not everyone. There's people out there who don't wear masks, and there's people who say, you won't lock me down. Of course there are. There are people who won't chip in and help. But most of us, I think we've done quite well. We've pulled together. We've tried to get financial support. I got financial support for my business. We're trying to help people all the time. Let's pull together. We don't want anyone going hungry. We don't want anyone's business to close. We are pulling together, and that's going to get us through. It's more than, to me, it's more than money. It's an attitude. It's well, okay, we don't have whatever 100 pounds. We have 20 pounds. Okay, how are we going to make that work? And that's what I see here. There's a resilience to Scottish people that I think, and not. And of course, when I say Scottish people, I'm including me, and I'm including you. The people who live here, the Scots who live here, the Scottish people who live here, we have something in common, and we want to make it work, and we want to help each other out. So whether you're English or you're American or you're born Scottish or you're German or what, I think if you're here, you want to be here and you want to work together and you want to make it happen. And I think we will. I have great faith in the people here, and I've seen 15 years here. I've seen people just go out of their way to help people. And I think it's great. And I'll throw one final thought on this one. And the Scottish government just allowed people like me the right to vote just recently, because I'm not from the Commonwealth. I'm not from Europe. So I wasn't allowed to vote in a lot of elections. And now I am. Americans are allowed to vote now. And other people from other countries like me, that aren't Commonwealth. That's the right attitude. Let's include people. Let's pull people. I see a very international country here. And Edinburgh is a perfect example. You can walk around Edinburgh, you hear a million accents. And whereas that might frighten somebody, I think that's fantastic. I love that. I love that you walk around, you go, oh, wow, those guys are Chinese. And what's that? Is that Italian? Oh, yeah, no, I think maybe that's Spanish. I love that. LA was that way. LA, you walk around LA and it's like, God, the whole world is here. And Edinburgh's that way. The whole world is there. And I think that makes you stronger. I don't agree with the people of Farage and that bunch, that immigrants are these horrible people that destroy the country. When I see immigrants, I see business owners, I see nurses, I see doctors. That's who I see when I see immigrants. I gave up a very lucrative career to come here and open a small business. I'm not making the money I used to make, but I'm happier. It's quality of life. And that quality of life is, I think, another one, that well-being, that's the word. The Scottish government started talking about well-being. Well, good. Yeah, let's talk about that, shall we? Because there's more to life than money. I know I made a lot more money in the States. My wife made huge more money in the States. You come here, yeah, it's about well-being. It's about having a comfortable life and having if you fall down, somebody's going to help you up. I think that's worth it.
Well, that's all for this episode of Ken Bates' Conversations.
This is a new voice for a new Scotland.
Join me next time when I'll be speaking to another indie activist who's made Scotland their home. If you'd like to join me for a chat, why not drop me an email to studio@indylive.radio. Until next time, stay safe